So last week, Meta had to apologize after, as reported by The Guardian, Instagram users were subject to a flood of violence, gore, animal abuse, and dead bodies on their Reels feeds, including people being beaten and killed. So, what do you think Meta's response was to that? We have fixed an error that caused some users to see content on their Instagram Reels feed that should not have been recommended. We apologize for the mistake. That's not exactly an impressive level of accountability in my mind.
Absolutely. I was reading this article as well, and it's just really horrifying as much AI as we have right now, and of course, seemingly as many filters as they probably have internally. Some of this stuff was able to slip through. I think it just shows us once again that, Meta has an enormous amount of problems, Jeff. And really speaking of that, I don't know if you saw the John Oliver segment that he did on Last Week Tonight, because he dedicated a lot of time to talking about the company's lax content moderation policies. And then he actually went as far as to actually give people advice in terms of how they could go to both Facebook and Instagram, adjust their settings so that Meta can no longer profit off their personal data. So pretty cool to see.
I mean, that is definitely sounds like some very useful advice. We're all going to have to start doing more of that stuff and taking it more seriously. It's amazing what a drag there is on that. But and there are other negative impacts from companies like Meta, Google, and others as we push forward into the AI age, namely the insane amount of energy AI consumes. So I just read on utilitydive.com that AI now accounts for almost 4% of US electricity use, and that it's projected to nearly triple to 11% of all US electricity use in the next 5 years.
It's kind of staggering. And I have to say, Jeff, that this is the number one question that I get asked at keynotes all the time. People ask me about energy use. They're really worried about using AI, especially knowing that, one prompt can consume an enormous amount of energy. Do you think people will actually adjust their habits because of this?
I mean, I think it's a lot more likely we'll adjust how we get our energy. So you see the move towards nuclear power that the big tech companies are embracing. Frankly, I have no problem with that. Switzerland's had nuclear power for decades and decades and decades. And I believe the amount of spent fuel that people always are worried about is less than would all fit inside a gymnasium in your average school. So I think probably the most likely correction is you can't change how people behave. You just change everything else around them. So I could see nuclear being adopted as a response to this, frankly.
Just a reminder for people that last week we had climate advisor and analyst Nat Bullard on the show, and he spoke about this very issue in terms of monitoring how much energy AI is using. In fact, if you listen to the previous episode, we talked to him about the 200 slides he had prepared for the state of decarbonization in 2025, and he mentioned that this is an area that he's going to keep an eye on in the future. So looking forward to reading more on that. We're going to stick with this AI theme because Amazon just launched Amazon Alexa Plus. So this is a new version.
Original naming, eh?
I know, right? It's a new version of its virtual assistant with improved conversational AI. There are a bunch of new features. Did you have a chance to look into some of them? Anything that kind of stands out?
Yeah, I looked. It seems like it because it's actually tied into your Amazon account and all that sort of stuff. It seems like it can sort of go to the next step from a bunch of the AI assistants now in that it can order things for you. I believe I read a scenario where the AI, you could tell it to make an appointment to have your car looked at, and it could go and book that appointment and all this sort of stuff. So it does seem like it's getting to the next level and not what we normally think of as the AI assistant. So that's kind of cool to see that evolve. I'm not sure if I want my AI to be able to go and buy things for me, but we'll see about that.
Hey, as long as you're nice to your AI assistant, if you remember in my newsletter this week, I had that article that said that if you were nice to your AI assistant or even chatbots, that they actually had improved results. I think it was improved by about 30% in terms of just being kind. So, Jeff, we
That's
cannot
great.
we cannot let the robot overlords take over just yet. Just one quick thing I wanted to mention on this because there are a couple of new features in Alexa Plus that are designed specifically for kids. I've gone to a bunch of Amazon events and they actually do design a lot of their products around the entire family using them. Those features are things to help young people learn more about topics like science and space exploration, and even a generative AI feature that can create and tell stories to kids. So they kind of do put family kind of front and center in some of the stuff that they do.
Yeah, that seems really interesting, and I'll be curious to see how that evolves. And in fact, I'm going to talk about another Amazon headline in my The Other Mac segment. But before we do that and get on to our final news story, I wanted to share one of the craziest science medicine stories that I've heard in a long time, which is about a surgeon in Vancouver who's using a woman's tooth to help restore her vision.
Okay. Okay, so I purposely did not read this article, which I never do. I always read articles when we're going to talk about them. But I thought to myself, I want Jeff to explain this to me because this is the most bizarre headline that I have ever seen in terms of an example of a procedure. I don't even understand how using a woman's tooth could help restore her vision. So you're going to have to break this down for
The,
us.
the crazy thing is this fairly rare procedure is about 50 years old. I think it started in Italy. And it works with patients who have gotten damage to the front of their eye, but the back of their eye still functions properly. So, what they do is they remove one of your teeth, they drill a hole through the middle of that tooth, and they glue a plastic lens inside. Then they sew that tooth with the plastic lens inside the patient's cheek, where it stays for several months until a layer of tissue grows around it. Then you pull it out with the tissue intact, cut a little hole in the tissue over where the lens is, and you stuff that thing into the person's eye and sew it into place with the tissue. And then the eye can use that new lens at the front of the eye to see through. And the back of the eye receives the light properly. So it's when somebody has something that's blocking the light from coming in their eye in the right way, this can essentially replace that lens with a lens embedded in a tooth in your eyeball so that that light gets through to the back of your eye. And the results, I think they were saying over 50% of people who have had the procedure get their vision back good enough so that they can like drive a car and stuff like that. So it's really incredible and so bizarre. So I just wanted to bring it on because since I figured people would be kind of interested in it, it's pretty wacky.
It is wacky. And the first thing I think of when you say this is how many people have had this procedure. And, I think about all of the tech leaders that we have in the world that have so much money, and I can't say they've done anything along the lines of restoring sight. So this is pretty
Yes,
amazing.
exactly.
Very cool. Okay, so people can check out that story online and dive into exactly how that came to be. An incredible story, really. Now, we're going to stick with some more conventional tech news because just before we were recording, I saw this headline from Microsoft that they have announced that they're closing down Skype. And Jeff, I do want to say that I went to a couple of different sources as I usually do because I thought there's no way they're going to shut that down. I mean, Skype is kind of a staple in the world of communication, but in fact, they are saying goodbye to it in early May.
Yeah, and it's been around for something like 23 years or something like that. So, boy, oh boy, if you think back to the early 2000s, Skype was like a super high tech thing. I know we would use it in business for calls and to get a bunch of people on a call or record it and all that sort of stuff. So it's pretty wild to see it gone. And I guess I do understand that Microsoft has their Microsoft Teams product, so they're maybe kind of competing with themselves. But yeah, Skype will be another entry in the technology graveyard pretty soon.
Unbelievable. All right, up next, Jeff is going to break down what it means for the James Bond franchise to now be in the hands of Amazon in our next segment, The Other Mac.